Welcome to the Mountain Lair. For your safety and convenience, smoking is prohibited in the ballrooms. In case of an emergency, please use the exits to the right and left of the stage. Please exit the ballrooms immediately and calmly. Emergency exits are located at the rear of the building facing the plaza, in front of the building through the stairwell leading to the loading dock, and the stairwell next to the elevators in the event of a fire. For the safety of all guests, it is important to keep aisles and exits clear of obstacles at all times. Thank you for your cooperation, and enjoy your event.
Good afternoon, everyone. Oh, wow. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Okay, that's a little better. I'm Sharon Martin, Vice President for University Relations, and welcome today to our first campus conversation. We're glad that you're able to join us either here in person. We're also live streaming, so hope we have a great attendance across campus as we begin this new process. Today's conversation is the first of many that we will be holding in the coming months. As Dr. Gee mentioned in his State of the University address back in March, he has mobilized 12 different transformation teams that are charged with finding at least $45 million in both cost savings and revenue generation over the next 5 years. And while the teams are beginning to get to work, we know that it will take the ideas and suggestions from everyone at the university to truly be successful, and that is why we are here today. Our first topic focuses on the budget of West Virginia University. We are joined by Narvel Weiss, Vice President for Administration and Finance, and Russ Dean, Vice Provost, who will share how the university budget is structured, the challenges we face as an institution, as well as the opportunities we have before us to truly create a paradigm shift in higher education. The format for today's conversation will start with a presentation by Narvel and Russ, followed by time to ask questions and share ideas as it pertains to the budget and transformation. So now, without further ado, please help me welcome Narvel Weiss and Russ Dean.
We haven't even got organized who's doing which slides. So anyway, I really appreciate having everyone here. I'm really amazed that when the topic was Budget 101 that we have this many people showing up. But I've been surprised also the last couple of years as we've done budget presentations to various groups across the campus, how interested people are really in understanding how the budget's put together, where the revenues come from, and where the dollars are spent to run this university. And one comment I want to make before we get into any details, everything we're doing right now, whether it's deals with budget, transformation, or whatever, really is standing on President Gee's 3 pillars of educating the state, providing high-quality health for the state, and helping to increase the prosperity of the state. So everything we do, those 3 themes are weaving in and among them. So all I'm going to do initially is give you just a brief overview of what we're going to do. Then Narvel will talk about budget, and then I will talk a little about the 12 SWAT teams for transformation. We do want to take a few minutes to review how the WVU budget works. You may be surprised to learn the various sources of revenue we have, relatively the amount that comes from the state versus tuition and fees. We'd also like to share with you what we see as challenges and opportunities right now for the university, and I would say that the opportunities outweigh the challenges substantially. There are some challenges. We don't know exactly what will happen with the fiscal year budget for 17 at this point, but we should know that soon, and that may be a bit challenging for next year, but we think there are a lot of opportunities for WVU, and if we look down the road just 2 or 3 years, we'll see a much stronger, more vibrant university as a result of the work we're doing. We'll talk about the transformation teams a bit and the 12 teams and just briefly what they're going to do. And then we'd like to have an open discussion. I think because of the way we're set up here, while normally we might like to have an interaction during the presentation, I don't think that will work in our format that we have today. So I think we'll go through the presentation, and I think Narvel and I are going to come down front and then just engage in a conversation for the last several minutes of our time together. So with that, I will turn to Narvel to go through the budget issues.
Good afternoon, everyone. Russ is not allowing me to actually work the clicker, so I'm not exactly sure what's up with that, but so try to keep up, Dr. Dean. So good afternoon. My goal here is to try to provide some perspective on our $1.1 billion operation. Hopefully, when I am finished, you'll have a better understanding of where our revenues come from, as well as where we're expending our dollars. I also will spend a little time talking about the challenges with those 2 major revenue sources. So with that said, let's start with our revenues. Oh, you're already there. That's really good. So if you start to think about the overall budget, about 16%, or about $188 million comes from state appropriations. State appropriations comprises pop tax, upper payment limit on Medicare, lottery, and then the general revenue appropriation is about $135.4 million. So the dollars that we talk about that are being reduced at the state level at this point due to the contraction of the state's economy and the revenue collections, the amount that's really on the table is $135.4 million. The interesting point here is only 16% of our total $1.1 billion in revenue are actually coming from the state. Our largest source of revenue is tuition and fees, and that accounts for about 35% of our budget, and that's about $397 million. If I sort of just go around the circle here a little bit, other appropriations, which is really money that's allocated from the federal land grant, and that supports both the ag school and extension. That accounts for about 1% or about $9.4 million. Grants and contracts account for about $327 million or about 29%, and then auxiliaries account for 13% or 152 million. For those of you who may not understand what auxiliaries comprise, it's housing, it's mountain layer, PRT, athletics, the student rec center, and so anything that is really designed to generate revenue to cover its own operating expenses. And so if you think about those revenues, you really have some capacity in terms of flexible spending around state appropriation and the tuition and fees. State appropriations come undesignated, and tuition and fees have little restrictions in terms of spending in terms of statute. So one of the challenges that we're facing is that we have a contracting appropriation from the state, and we have some challenges on enrollment, and that we're in a very competitive enrollment environment. So let's move on and talk about expenses. Again, about $1 billion worth of spend. About 61% of our budget is really consumed in terms of salaries and related benefits. And so you can imagine that any changes that involve us dealing with a contraction on the revenue side will have some impact on our human capital, because such a large percent of our budget is tied up in our people. We also spend about 4% on scholarships and fellowships, and that's a very important investment because it helps us improve the profile and also helps us recruit the students who come to WVU. And so some of this actually acts as a discounting, if you will, to our overall tuition revenue back to getting us to net, which is what we really have available to support the operations. We spend about $32 million on utilities, which is about 3% of our budget. We also spend $220 million on supplies and other services, and that's about 21%. Depreciation accounts for about 8%. The good thing about the depreciation, it's a non-cash item, but what you're not having here in this slide is the capital, and so the capital acts as an offset through this depreciation expense. Other expenses are about $3.5 million. Debt service, we're relatively low in terms of our leverage point, and that's about $33.7 million, or about 3%. And so that gives you some idea about where we're spending our dollars. And so if you start to then just focus in on the general revenue, and I mean, we talked about general appropriations of $135, and so and again, those are in 2016 dollars, not $2,000. So in 2000, and this is just for the general university, we received about $115 million in general revenue appropriations. If you compare that to 2014, we're down $10 million over those about 15 years. And then if you move on to the next slide, we're now down about $15 million, and quite frankly, we anticipate that we'll have an additional reduction in 17 and maybe even an additional reduction in 18. So you can see that over the last 15, 16 years, we've had a contraction in our general revenue appropriations, and these are in real dollars. This doesn't suggest the loss of buying power due to inflation. So thank goodness there's tuition, and so if you flip to the next page, again, tuition is our largest single source of revenue. In 2000, we collected about $96 million in tuition revenue. And then in 2014, that number jumped to $251 million. Now, some of the increase was attributable to enrollment growth, pretty significant enrollment growth during this time period, but also with the tuition adjustments that have taken place. And if you think about the overall amount of revenue that we're talking about here, we actually are starting to look more like a private institution than a public institution, in that we're so dependent on tuition at this point. So we've also continued to invest in our students, and especially our need-based students, and therefore in 2016 we added $2.25 million to ensure that we remain competitive, especially for those students who qualified for need-based aid. We also need to continue to make strategic investments, and we've allocated $4.5 million to support Project 168, and I think Russ will get into this in a little more detail, but the heart of Project 168 is really about retention, and if we can grow retention, that also will help us grow tuition revenues. And so a critical part of Project 168 is having students create a 4-year academic plan, a 4-year financial plan, and to engage them in career planning. We also are spending more money on Adventure West Virginia, which, if you look at the retention numbers for students who come out of this program, it's actually pretty remarkable, the difference compared to the general population. We're also looking at live-learn communities, and we've got the Student Success Collaborative, all looking and trying to find ways of improving our retention program. So if you go back and sort of look at some of the highlights from the 2016 financial plan, one of the things that we wanted to focus on was we wanted to maintain a positive operating margin. That's after adjusting for the effects of GASB 45, amortization of software, and unrealized gains for investment. We also want to stay focused on our cash balance position. We have a relatively small amount of cash available. I think at the end of the financial statement, it's about 78. And I'm looking at the back room to see if Dan Durbin's raising his head up and down to make sure that I was reasonably correct about that. And so it's certainly an acceptable amount, but we have to be very cognizant of our cash position. We also got to continue to spend money on our 2020 strategic plan. We got to continue to invest in our employees and our students, and we also need to continue to invest in infrastructure. So that's a balancing act between these various priorities that I've just described. So at this point, that should have, you should now become budget experts, and so there's no quiz, thank God. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Russ, who's going to spend some time talking about some of our strategic initiatives around transformation.
Thank you, Narvel. So, Narvel, I was actually planning to distribute a quiz. I'm sorry that Narvel, I'm the faculty member, so I thought a short quiz right now would be an appropriate thing to do. I want to talk a little bit about some of the strategic initiatives that we have underway, well, under discussion. Not every one of these is underway, to give you some idea of the kinds of things we're beginning to think about for where we might go in the future. First, we believe there is an opportunity to develop new academic programs that both are designed to help serve the state more effectively, but also generate interest in students that otherwise might not come to WVU as a way to increase enrollment. We want to raise research productivity, but with a focus on how that research helps solve the problems of the state of West Virginia and the problems we're encountering here as a state. I think our belief is that if we do the kinds of things that help solve problems in the state of West Virginia, it will lead to a national reputation in terms of doing excellent research that's applied. We want to continue to encourage outreach into the state. Again, it's part of President Gee's mission, is that as a land-grant university, we have a strong obligation to serve the state and provide outreach activities to the state, and we want to continue those. We need to continue expanding philanthropy. We've got a $1 billion capital campaign, which it looks like we will easily hit that mark. But those dollars are very important because the dollars that come through philanthropy are in many cases, some flexible dollars that are not coming from the state and are not coming from tuition and fees and are very important to running the university. Many of those dollars are either in student scholarships or in faculty professorships. In terms of the student dollars, we use those dollars to help discount the cost to high-quality performers to try to attract them to WVU, which has been helping us raise the profile of the entering class. Of course, on the assumption that we do continue to grow the university, we will have to hire additional faculty. And of course, we will also have retirements, we have resignations, so we'll have to continue to hire. One key focal point on this is we need to hire at market so we can be very competitive and hire our first choices. And then along with that is augmenting salaries, because as we do this, this will inevitably lead to some conversions and inversions and compression. So we have to have a long-term plan to deal with inversion and compression for the faculty who are already here. Of course, we do need to increase enrollment. That is, as Narvel said, that huge increase you saw in the tuition and fees collected, a lot of that was, as a result of growing about 8,000 non-residents over about a decade, in addition to the normal tuition and fee increases. So the two together generated a lot of revenue, which allowed us to do bond, to do major renovation of old buildings, build new buildings, do salary increase programs, make investments in strategic initiatives. At this point, we've pretty much leveled out on the enrollment we have, so if we wanted to have additional net revenue to work with, we need to grow the enrollment. And of course, one immediate expense that would come off the top of that would be adding additional faculty and staff lines to support that. We're looking at revamping advising and other student support. This is really a part of Project 168. because it's not only about bringing students in the front door, but it's about supporting them as they get here so that they retain and they actually graduate, with a goal to graduate in 4 years instead of 5 or 6. We think that on balance, the single best way to reduce the loan indebtedness on students is to actually have them graduate sooner. We can talk about costs, we can talk about debt management, but in fact, if they're here a semester or 2 less, it's going to cost them a lot less to be here. We have continuing needs for capital through construction and renovation, and of course you've been hearing through work in publications in our e-news that's coming out. The bureaucracy busters have been at work. We've been doing a lot of things to try to streamline the way the bureaucratic work of the university is done so we can have cost savings there. One overarching goal here is that as we pursue efforts to reduce bureaucracy, it's really about making it transparent to the campus. Or if anything, when you engage with the bureaucracy in some way, it's actually even more efficient and quicker than it has been in the past. So we think with the availability of technology now, there's a lot of software available to make things work smoother and more efficiently and on balance with less employees supporting it. So that is one of the ways in which we can have some cost savings over time. So opportunities. Again, enrollment growth will be achieved both through recruiting a larger freshman class and also improving retention. The president said in his State of the University address that he'd like to see freshman retention rise to 90%. Right now, we went up, I think, 2 percentage points this year, and we're at about 79% right now. So we have a long way to go. Moving 11 percentage points will not be easy, but we do think that with a lot of these programs that are being discussed now, and some of which will be implemented even this fall, we actually think that that might be a realistic goal, and we might actually hit that. A 10% increase in retention rate would be phenomenal, both for the students, in terms of them being able to finish degrees, but also in terms of the revenue bottom line of the university. Also, we've been engaged in tuition discounting since about 2000. This is basically, for those of you who don't know what that is, it's what virtually every university is into now, although I believe we were the first major public university to do this. We discount for the high-end academic students to make WVU more attractive to them so they will come to the university. And we do that throughout the spectrum, and it's based both on, initially it's just on the academic profile, but as we get into the point where we have the FAFSA information, we know what their financial needs are, we also add additional funding to the need-based aid, so we make WVU more attractive. That was a big part of how we grew the university over those years. It's time to rethink that, though. That was a fairly, I would describe it as course approach. We had big chunks of students depending on their ACT and their GPA, and we designed the scholarships around that. There's a lot of availability now in modeling that we can actually make that much more granular, so we can come much closer to the exact package we think that student needs in order to attract them to WVU. That work is underway right now. Of course, we must be innovative. That means we've got to be prepared for change, but honestly, this university's been going through so much change the last 10 or 15 years, I think people here are prepared for that. Plus, the president keeps us all enough off balance on change that I think that we're all getting very accustomed to it. And then there are a series of transformation teams, and I'll talk about those in just a second, that were charged with accumulating a $45 million cost saving, combined cost savings and revenue enhancement over the next 5 years. So we have $45 million available to make investments in strategic initiatives, salary increases, and so forth. So Narvel, if you go, thank you. Okay, I'm going to do this very quickly. There are 12 teams. We don't have time to go through them in great detail. The team number one is to take a look at the financial assumptions we've put into place for building the 5-year financial plan of the university, and this would be headed by the provost and the university planning committee. Then team number two is position management and authorization to fill vacant positions. Quickly, if we identify areas where we think there's a chance to bring units together across the campus into a shared service type of unit, we believe there would be more efficiency and actually by applying technology, more responsiveness. And at the end of the day, as a result of retirements and resignations, the number of employees needed to do that would be fewer. We need to fully utilize the dollars we have at the foundation. Many of those accounts are used well, but we also know there are a lot of accounts that have been accumulating some cash over time. We think that cash is available to pay for things that normally the regular budget's paying for. By being able to shift those expenses to the foundation revenues, which are much larger now than they were just a few years ago, that will be another way to effectively increase the budget of the university. We need to simplify and standardize business functions across the university. We find with a lot of business operating units across the campus, virtually every unit has its own rules that it operates on. It leads to confusion. It leads to lack of efficiency. So by bringing those more into alignment and more uniformity across the campus, we believe we can get efficiencies. Consolidate and coordinate student academic support services. I think Sue Day Perutz, who's our associate provost for undergraduate ed, I think has done a study, and we found over 30 tutoring centers across the campus, many of which are very small. There is a possibility, if we look closely at that, we can consolidate some of those, have them be a little bit larger and more focused and with a little more depth, and they will be able to be not only function, but function better than they do now. Evaluating supervisor positions. Many of you are aware that in the old HR system, one way you can get a pay grade increase is by having someone report to you. So we have a number of cases where one person reports to one person, reports to one person. We're trying to place, excuse me, now we have more flexibility in how we set salaries for classified staff. We have the ability to take a closer look at that and try to get that spread out a little bit more so we have more employees reporting into a supervisor. We're looking at new ways, new sources to expand existing revenues, review the auxiliary business models. There are a slew of ideas there that are coming out of ways that we can generate additional revenue to the campus. Team number 8. This is a group trying to look at, I guess I'd classify it as sunsetting certain operations. It's just like any government organization. Things get created and then they just kind of keep rolling along. Is to really take a close look at some of the things we have on campus, whether centers, institutes, all kinds of things, and whether they really still are viable and they're really value added to the campus, or whether it's really time to sunset those. Team 9, we have across the campus, we have marketing people, we have communications people, et cetera. The question is there value to bringing more of them together into a more central approach to that? I'll give you two quick examples. One is in IT. When John Campbell took over as Chief Information Officer, we took 3 large units, one that was in academic affairs, one that had been in student life, and one that was in administration and finance. We merged them into one large central information technology system unit supporting IT across the campus. In addition, John began routinely meeting with the IT leads in all the various units, the colleges and the divisions. It's been remarkable the change that's made in terms of more unified strategic planning, more unity in terms of how the resources are being used to acquire software, support the software, and so forth. In that case, the units that were out in the colleges stayed separate. HR has a model running where they have what they call embedded HR people in the various units. It's not every unit, but several have bought in. Those individuals actually continue to report to HR, but they're located out in the unit that they're serving, so they understand the needs of the unit. So we have both models running. We have both of them have a highly centralized office. In one case, the employees are employees of the central office, but they're out in the units. In other cases, they're just they're functional units out within the various units across the campus, but they're coordinated through the Chief Information Officer. So we want to look more at that. Implement behavior-based utility management. I mean, what that simply means is, in a very, very simple case, turn off the lights when you leave your office. Simple little things like that can save electricity and save energy for the campus. I'm sure Randy has a few more ideas than just turning off the light switch, but that's the kind of thing that's talking about. We want to look at supporting, transforming the support of general education, improve quality measures. A lot of this is around outcomes assessment and how effective the general education program is and where it might be improved so that it's more value added to students. Excuse me. And number 12 is to take a much closer look at how our graduate students are funded, particularly through graduate assistantships and waivers. We believe that some units are using waivers very, very effectively, and others are not using them so effectively, and how those might be used more effectively to both increase the quality of the incoming graduate student class as well as increase the number of graduate students supported. So those are quickly the 12 teams that we have in place. And at this point, I think we will open it up for questions, and we have mics that we're going to come down.
Should we come down?
I think.
Thank you for holding these. Excuse me. I'm Trina Wafel, Many of you know me, long time WVU person. Is a lot of this information available online? Because I enjoyed hearing about the teams. I kind of like to know who's behind them, if we have ideas, who to contact, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, everything you're seeing today will be online. The website Bureaucracy Busters is designed to give everyone across campus an opportunity to share ideas or thoughts, or to react, if you will, to some ideas that we're surfacing. So please go to the website, engage, and share whatever ideas you might have. This is sort of like a group think. We believe that we're going to have a much better chance at getting to the $45 million over a 5-year basis if we can get the entire campus engaged. Please.
I don't want to have all the questions. I was trained earlier as a journalist. So,
Oh, here comes the hard one.
yeah, actually, the 45 million, I've never, it hasn't sunk in. 45 million is both cost savings and revenue enhancement. Can you comment on in a little more detail about that?
Well, again, there's really, and not to be overly simplistic, but there's really two ways of dealing with a shortfall. And one is we can create new streams of revenue, or we can reduce cost. Preferably we'd like to grow revenues. And so it can be in terms of new services. It could be that we find ways of coordinating or integrating operations, and therefore we have more capacity, which then potentially could lead to additional revenue. The other part of this is becoming, if you will, more efficient, which has the ability to reduce costs but doesn't have any impact on some of our various revenue streams. For example, we don't want to get rid of a program because that'll have an impact in terms of a reduced revenue, but at the same time, we may have more capacity than we're utilizing, and therefore, if we could raise the number of students that are actually in that program, it could generate revenue without having any impact on the cost structure.
What revenue streams have been explored as of right now?
Well, we've been at this all of about 3 weeks, and so, I mean, this hasn't been a long, drawn-out process. I can tell you one of the things that we're looking at is professional education, conferencing, trying to utilize the Alumni Center. We think there's some potential upside if we could get all those various areas integrated and coordinated. We have some very talented faculty who, alumni and friends and other professionals around the region would certainly benefit by engagement from them. And so I think we're trying to figure out how we might create a package that would do that.
And I would add to that we will probably be announcing a little bit later this week the new Dean of Online and Professional Education who will be coming on board this summer. And not only do we have a lot, I think we've done a lot with online degree programs which can continue to grow, but there also, I think, are a lot of opportunities in continuing professional development that are not academic credit, but existing professionals would like to have some additional support from WVU. And that could be a substantial revenue stream. I do want to get back to that point, though, about our goal is to actually make the place more efficient. So generally out in the units, you'll actually see a more responsive university when you're trying to do things like travel, when you're trying to do procurement, et cetera. So the idea is not to pinch pennies and make it more difficult to do work, but actually by thinking about how to use technology more effectively, actually make the university more responsive with fewer people needed to support it.
I'm a little slow sometimes, so bear with me, but I'm not quite sure I understand the numbers. The state appropriation was about 188 million, and I think the figure I've heard bandied about is we might lose 10%. So I'm assuming that's kind of the 19 million of the 45.
Yeah, I think
where's the other 26 come from?
Yeah, when you look at the financial statements and you look at the state appropriated number, it includes lottery revenue, upper payment limit on Medicare, POP tax, and so and general revenue appropriations. And so what the legislature has been contracting is just on the general revenue piece, which is a component of the $188 million state appropriations. They historically would not cut the upper payment limit on Medicare, or they would not reduce the pop tax because it's a dedicated fee. So everyone in the room here, if you would drink more Coke or other beverages, is actually a way of putting money into the Health Sciences Center. Not that I'm advocating anything about your health issues related to drinking Coke, so just in terms of full disclosure here.
Good afternoon. First of all, I do want to thank you for the changes you've made to the procurement process thus far. We've really appreciated that at the Health Sciences Center. Two questions. Mr. Weiss, you discussed a pie chart where you showed the breakdown of our expenses, and if I remember correctly, 61% is for salaries and fringe benefits. How does that compare to our peers? Are we on line with that, or are we low, we high, or any of the categories?
No, I
that you
actually
discussed?
think we're pretty consistent in terms of our expenses in regards to people. I mean, we're a people-intensive business, and so it's not surprising. And I think our peers, in terms of that percent, would be somewhat consistent. It's going to be in that 60, 70% range. Now, smaller schools are going to have probably a little higher percent, and there may be some larger schools, if a hospital is involved, might be a little smaller, but I think that's pretty consistent. And let me also just give a shout out to Dan and David for all the great work they've been doing in procurement. Not so much thanking me, but thanking them, because they've really been doing an amazing job in transforming how we procure goods and services. So David, Dan, thank you.
I had one other comment, if I may. You also discussed enrollment and the phenomenal growth we've had over the past decade, say. And if I've missed this in a news flash, I apologize, but what's the plan for enrollment for the next decade?
Well, the president has a plan. No, the freshman class size has been, I think it's the largest it's ever been, was 5,100 and something. It's tended to hover around 4,900, 5,000, 5,100. The goal is to get that to 5,500. That would probably add about 2,000 more students to the overall population. The president has also stated he'd like to get the overall WVU family up to 40,000. Right now it's 33. So we'd have to add 7,000 more students across WVU, main campus, Potomac State, and Tech to get there. We already anticipate Tech will grow by about 1,800 once it's moved to Beckley, so it'll go from about 1,200 or 1,300 up to about 3,000. We also believe Potomac State has a capacity of around 2,200, and they're at about 1,500 right now. So there'll be a gap in there, and I don't remember, I can't do the arithmetic fast enough in my head. I think the bulk of that gap will be filled in with online degree programs. We still believe, while we have a number, there's a lot of opportunity. Yeah, as Narwhal said, retention, if that grows to any appreciable amount, that will help a lot. And then the other area where we've not spent a lot of attention up to this point is international undergraduate students. There's a tremendous market out there. We're just now really beginning to get an organization put in place to aggressively recruit international students at the undergraduate level. We've always had a lot of international students at the graduate level, particularly in STEM. We've never had all that many at the undergraduate level, and that's begun growing the last few years. We expect that to grow quite a bit. And of course, they pay non-resident tuition. Other questions?
First, thank you for holding these sessions for us. I do have one quick question for you. If 61% of the budget represents staff wages and fringe benefits, and recognizing President Ski push for merit-based pay for performance, do you envision that staff pay for performance, or faculty for that matter, decreasing to meet that $45 million?
Are you asking me whether we're going to contract the workforce?
Not necessarily, but in scaling back on pay increases.
Well, one of the big challenges that we have going forward when you've got a contraction of revenues is how do you continue to retain the talent and recruit the talent that you have. And we have a 5-year financial plan that would have anticipated some increases over the next 4 years. I think what we're looking at is maybe a different way of compensating for this coming year, maybe linking a one-time increase of some level, I don't think we're quite there yet, to the level of savings that we might generate out of the SWAT teams, and so there'd be a connect between those two. In other words, just conceptualizing, we're not quite there trying to figure out all that, but we have an interest in doing salary adjustments. Every year that we fail to provide some increase means that we're losing our competitive position in the marketplace. And so we recognize that. The question is, how do we do that in a year when we have contracting revenues and creating base obligations? Now, if we can do some one time and then maybe give us another year to work through some of our revenue and cost containment ideas, I think our goal would be to maybe do something a little higher in maybe 19 or 18 than we'd anticipated. So.
Yeah, I think we can say safely we're committed to continuing the salary increase programs in the out years. We think fiscal 17 next year is going to be a challenge. That's why we're thinking about possibly some sort of a one-time pay. So something happens next year, possibly some critical retention raises to make sure we hold on to people that we think are most vulnerable. But really, in the out years, what we saw was, and in fact this showed up for those of you who were at the board meeting on Friday, Bob Griffiths made a presentation on behalf of faculty, and what he showed was, if you look over the last several years, for a number of years, our faculty compared to their peers were steadily making progress to getting closer to the average. The last couple of years, they started dropping back off because we didn't have the money to give the kind of raises we would like to give, and all those other states now are out of their recessions and they're generating money and giving more money to their universities. There was very interesting graphic information to demonstrate the challenge we currently have, and I think we're committed to doing everything we can in the out years to keep that going and get that back in place. And a big part of that is merit pay, and rewarding people for doing a really good job. It's been going on with the faculty probably for a good 20 years now. And it does seem to have an appreciable effect on productivity.
In the Morgantown region it's a very competitive enrollment environment. There's a lot of growth taking place. I think the hospital system is anticipating adding 1,000 new employees over the next 2 years, and so Milan and lots of others are continuing to grow. So this is a tough labor market, which means we have to provide increases if we're going to compete for the best and brightest talent.
So can I go back to your first interpretation of his question? Is there a goal of contracting the workforce, the numbers?
I don't think we've got to the point where we have a target number at this point. Again, with 61% of our cost connected to employees and fringe benefits, and recognizing that we're either trying to raise $45 million or new revenue or contract spending by some value, that it would not, I'm not sure how we could do that without some reduction in force. The good news is we have, I think, about 300 vacancies right now. I think that was the latest number. It may have gone down a little bit. And we're averaging about 15 to 16 retirements. So we have flexibility, if you will, within the workforce. And so as we transform and redesign how we do business or how we deliver services or programs, I'm not sure we're to the point where we think we'll have to do any layoffs at this point. It's more about utilizing the resources that we have available.
Yeah, I think the question's a hard one because it kind of suggests we're trying to look at an overall possible reduction or increase. I think what you will see as things roll out where we're trying to gain efficiencies in some offices, some office size, staff sizes may drop. Because as we add technology and other techniques, it may take fewer people to get that work done. On the other hand, there's a lot going on in terms of student support and advising, tutoring, et cetera, to help them be successful and get out of here and actually earn a degree once they start. We may have to make investments in people there, and if we grow, we will probably have to add faculty, and there will be some additional support staff to support them. So it's kind of hard to answer it corporately as to whether we're going to contract or not, but I would say the contraction will be in various offices as we're able to transform the operations. As Narvel said, there are enough vacancies at any given point. If an office staff needs to be reduced, we most likely could find another place for the people in that office if we have more than we need. So the goal would be to not do layoffs. And with an institution this size, you normally don't have to do that if you've got a little bit of time to work through the budget.
Well, and again, if we can find $45 million in new revenue, it would make all of our lives a lot easier.
So think, send us your ideas, as long as it's legal, or mostly legal.
Why are you being so restrictive?
We want it legal, Russ.
Oh, spoken from you are, I assume.
So I have an idea. I have no idea if it's a good one. I have no experience in budgetary things, but I think we'd all rather have higher salaries, of course. But in years of significant constraint, as it seems as though we might be coming across, has anyone thought about potential increases to retirement contributions instead that could allow you to plan for down the road when things are a little better?
Yeah, I mean, we've explored raising the retirement contribution. We've explored dealing with, PEIA and some of the related costs. I think all of those things that are on the table as we start to think through and reimagine how we compensate our employees. It is just difficult to create additional base obligations going forward, because once you raise that contribution, it's pretty hard to go back. And so it's really not a lot of difference, except for maybe, I guess, it would be a little less expensive to make some additional contributions than doing salaries, because of the rest of the benefits are being driven off of those salary costs. But I mean, it's still another ongoing fixed obligation. I mean, there's a lot of people who would like to have tuition assistance, elder care. I mean, we would love to be in a position to have a cafeteria plan for benefits. And so if you wanted, to maybe not have as many vacation days, but wanted a 7%, contribution into the retirement plan, that would be an option that you could select. Unfortunately, that's not flexibility that we currently have, but I think we're working on trying to increase that.
Yeah,
Good question.
Yeah, very good question. And we've talked about this for a bit. We did explore the idea informally of some folks, and the newer employees kind of said they would rather have the money. So, which I understand, but I think if we had, as Narvel said, if we get more flexibility, and one of the teams is really looking at flexibility issues, things we may want to talk to the legislature next year about in terms of more flexibility for the campus to function more independently and more agile way and more responsive to the needs and desires of our employees. So, and we get some signal that there might be some interest in that in the legislature. Right now, I think they're so busy fighting about the budget that it's hard to get their attention on this at this point.
Yeah.
Thank you. I did appreciate the fact that WV is becoming a better place to attract international graduate students, that like how you mentioned. I'm an international graduate student. I'm also a graduate teaching assistant. Is there, what's the effect on this with respect to, let's say, on a regular basis, I interact a lot with freshmen, and is there a way that we could actually make this change more effective, where just by, no, I'm just trying to understand, is there a particular strategy that we can use just to attract more freshmen, even at the teaching level? Is that something that you're looking at?
You mean a larger freshman class?
Yes.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's sort of, it's what we live our lives doing it right now, is actually focusing on bringing the freshman class size up, and at the same time at least maintaining its quality profile. For a number of years, we were increasing the size of the class and increasing the academic profile. Last year, unfortunately, the class size went down a little bit, but the profile went up dramatically. It was, in fact, it's created a bit of a cash problem this year because those high-end students were discounted more than the ones we lost. So we had a swing in cash that we were not expecting this year. So no, the goal is to get to 5,500. Now, it's a challenge, and one of the things to give you some thought, some idea of where we're heading, we're probably going to be hiring a regional recruiter in the Houston area in Texas, because it turns out we have a huge alumni base there. We did an event down there, Sharon, about a month and a half ago.
It was in February.
Yeah, so we had a good turnout. We added some special scholarshiping for legacies as well as being from Texas. It's creating a lot of interest down there. We're looking at some other states that might be possibilities like that, where we have an alumni group, for example, I believe in Silicon Valley. We actually have a fairly substantial alumni group. That's a target area we may think about putting a regional recruiter in. So we're not just going to the traditional catch base, and we're trying to spread out across the country to areas where we think we would have some leverage. So yes, no doubt, that's a big part of it.
I've been here for a long time. And for a long time, we've talked about we need technology, technology, technology. That's always been on the table. But it's also expensive. Are we going, what is our plan? Do we have a plan to do something different in that area?
Where is
I'm
John?
from, like I should tell you, I'm from HR, and we've been crying for systems for a long, long, long time. So anything there would make a difference, I think.
No, well, for example, in HR, we just rolled out Hire, WVU Hire, which is a much more efficient way of hiring individuals. In fact, I just approved one about a half an hour before I came over here, approved to continue on through the system. No, we've been making investments in, I don't even want to think about how much money we invest in IT on this campus. It's a few years ago, I don't want to offend anyone, but a few years ago, one of our provosts was at a provost meeting, and they said, well, the two black holes on a campus, I'm sorry, are the librarians and IT. Because both of them are they're insatiable demands in terms of serving the campus. We have been adding quite a bit to the IT budget over the last few years, and I imagine we'll continue to do that. And a lot of it is around these systems like WVU Hire, the procurement system we're putting in place, so all this is much more automated. So yeah, there's a lot of investment going in. But a lot of money, I'm sure you understand, a lot of money in IT right now is maintaining what we've got. I mean, we are absolutely, well, just unplug your computer for a day, and you have some sense of how dependent we are on IT. We essentially would stop functioning if we couldn't be connected. So yes, it's a high priority. In fact, it's not only for the business function. I think it was alluded to in our presentation. A lot of work is now going on in our work with the Education Advisory Board on the Student Success Collaborative, where we use the IT function to identify places where students may need help. For example, sets of courses that when they take them combined, we know they have a lot of problems succeeding. So that's very much an IT-driven solution. And that's just been in place, John, for about a year. And we're just now really beginning to roll that out on how we will use that to help advise the incoming freshman class. We think all of this combined will make a difference. Thank you.
We still have a few minutes. Any other questions? Yes.
The private partnerships. Can you speak to the private partnerships and the success of those, and looking forward, are you going to increase, decrease that?
This is yours. Yeah, I guess it is mine. Well, I guess I would, and maybe I'm an unfair person to judge, but I would suggest that the private-public partnerships have been a huge success. We've added 2,700 new beds, student beds. We have different kind of space that we can offer up students today that wasn't even imaginable 5 years ago. We've added those beds without any capital outlay in terms of the construction of those facilities. We did acquire some land. I'm very happy that we acquired 49 parcels in Sunnyside, which was the most dilapidated, disgusting place in Morgantown. We have the student tour bus that would go by there on a regular basis, and we got to the point where we had to create distractions because we didn't want to have individuals actually looking at that neighborhood. And so, you know, from the perspective of sort of community and renewal and in that area as well, of adding new capacity, I think it's been a huge success. The good news is we share in margin on all these deals, and so we have no obligation on the debt whatsoever, but we do get to participate in the upside. Those dollars will go back in to improve the remaining student housing stock that we have. I think Bill would tell you that the housing stock's a little outdated, and in some cases, I'm not sure, a renewal. It's vintage, thank you. And so I guess we're hoping it becomes charming as it ages, and so I don't know about if we can make it charming. The other partnership is the Connector building. You know, very proud of that. Has anyone had a chance to see the Connector building? Yeah? You've tried any of the food options? What's your favorite food option? The barbecue? Donkey, little donkey? Yeah. Coffee? So I think, you know, we had a problem with the Evansdale campus, and that we had topography issues, and that it was impossible to get from the upper part of Evansdale campus to the lower part. And we also had no place on the Evansdale campus for students to eat and hang out and relax. And so, You know, we have just a world-class building now with lots of food options. We have a great coffee shop. We have the hub that's in the building. So the first time we got student accounts, financial aid, and registrar. Thank you. All located in the same building. We have a business incubator set up, and so anyone who has an interest in being entrepreneurs.
The media school.
And then we have the media school that has something very similar, and we have a bank, and we have a post office, and I feel like I'm a real estate agent here, but so I would encourage you to go check it out, and after 5, you can enjoy the food and enjoy the view. It's quite breathtaking on the 5th floor.
That was what you were going to say.
I know. I got the look.
One thing I'd like to comment too from the academic side of the house, what's really, to me, powerful about the public-private partnerships is the university has very little cash in the deal. And if you think about it, we've got a few more academic buildings that really need attention. We have not absorbed bonding capacity in order to do that work in those buildings. At some point, when we have the enrollment up a little bit and we have a little more cash flow, there will be the ability to do more bonds to make investments in some of the academic buildings that need work on the campus, or some areas where colleges are growing and they need expansion. So this is, I think, a great benefit in that it's not taken up payment dollars that would go toward these buildings because they're really running on the PPPs, so that does not take any money out of the university to run them. I actually am fascinated because I keep telling Narvel I think it violates the first law of thermodynamics, but I can't figure out exactly how they work, but I love them.
Who the hell even knows what that means?
Speaking of bonds, I was wondering, for the $270 million in bonds we borrowed to work on the Evansdale campus, how are the payments on those going?
They're going fine. I mean, again, we don't issue debt unless we have a dedicated stream of revenue, and so we're not into creating a 30-year obligation without having some commitment of revenues going forward to pay off those bonds. I mean, the last thing you want to do is default on debt. That would be the death in terms of ever doing another major capital projects with debt again. And so, in some cases, I think we would stop eating before we would not make a debt service payment. That's probably a little harsh, but
even at that, as you saw, I think in the distribution of dollars we expend, the amount going to debt service is actually a relatively small slice of the university's overall obligation.
Yeah, in terms of interest.
But proportionally, probably more than most other publics, because of other states, the state substantially pays for academic buildings, and the universities pay for the auxiliary buildings like housing. In West Virginia, we virtually fund all of that ourselves as an institution, because in West Virginia, the state provides almost no funding for buildings. So my guess is we probably have a somewhat higher debt burden than an equivalent university like Ohio University, Ohio State, Penn State, et cetera.
Yeah, we think we're one of maybe the few institutions in the country that does not receive an annual appropriation for capital projects.
So, and that's yet another way we really look more like a private than we do like a public. Anything else?
Okay, any other questions? It's your last chance for today. All right, if not, help me welcome or help me thank Narvel and Russ.
Thank you.
And if you have any colleagues who weren't able to join us today, we're going to have another session on Thursday at 10:30 at Erickson Alumni Center, so they can join us there. As Narvel said, all the information and a recording of this session will be at bureaucracybusters.wvu.edu, so you can check things out there as well. And then watch e-news, because we're going to have further conversations throughout the rest of the year on different topics that are relevant to our transformation as well as our growth as a university. So thanks for coming. We appreciate it, and we'll see you again soon.
One more last thing, we'd like to sort of give a shout out to Sharon and her team for doing a great job in getting us organized. So Sharon, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks to the team back there. Before you say anything else.
I'll get you.